Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the See Me Show. On this week's episode, I'm so excited to introduce you to an amazing individual, Edgley. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to give you a little brief background about your awesome journey. So Aaron is a powerlifting coach, ultra endurance athlete, and an incredible mental health advocate. As an elite athlete, Aaron has set an audacious goal of completing the most kilometers ran and pull-ups completed in 24 hours. Also, he can raise money for Black Health Alliance. I've never met anyone so dedicated and determined as you, Aaron. So, as such, there's way more to your story than what I've just mentioned. So, can you just share with our listeners more about your story?
First of all, that's a big statement. I like it. For someone who wrote a book, which I think is, from what I hear, is much harder than what I'm doing, but I appreciate it. So my story, I guess, starting from high school was an interesting one. And first of all, I like to start with my mom and father were very supportive, and I'm grateful for that. I know a lot of people in similar situations didn't have that support. So I always like to throw that out there off the bat, that I don't have it as hard as other people do. A lot of mistakes that I made were just my own poor choices in life and having to deal with them and take responsibility. But it's always important that I get that out. So in grade 9, first semester, I was actually expelled from Holy Cross Secondary School for selling drugs, which was an interesting experience. And then I went through diversion programs, a couple of second chance programs. I actually was kicked out of 2 second chance programs as well for lack of attendance. And when I was attending, I had pretty poor behavior. So I really had no other option because no second chance school programs were even going to take me in. And I remember the day I was at the youth diversion program down on Beckett Street here in Kingston with Darren Dougal, and we went across the hallway and he introduced me to a man named Marcus Neiman. And Marcus and Darren were talking, and Darren's like, yeah, no one's going to take this guy. So Marcus runs the ACE program. So that's the secondary chance school program for Regi, the high school here. And Marcus just right off the bat was like, oh, sure, I'll take him in. And Marcus used to be a really, really high level wrestler, and he's a wrestling coach at a very high level. And he's a tough love kind of guy. And he took me in and kind of role modeled for me a bit. And then I went back into the regular school system. I think it was like a 40 or 50% attendance rating. I had a 50 high school average. I'm in a lot of trouble. Throughout high school, I made the wrong choices to hang out in the wrong environments and with people that definitely weren't conducive to helping me grow as a human or my own success. So those are some bad choices that I made, and got involved in a lot of trouble and in drugs and things like that. So I ended up having to go back for an additional semester to get my high school, diploma? I don't even know what it's called.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I don't want to say his name because if it ever goes around, I don't want to get in trouble. But he's actually friends with my mother, and he took her out for coffee and said, listen, Aaron's not going to pass these 3 courses. And they were like grade 11 applied classes, like biology and some gym classes. He's like, I literally can't pass him, and he's not going to get his high school. So based on his grades. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give him a 50 on all 3 things so we can get a high school diploma, and so I can graduate him. So I have like a fake high school diploma. That's what I call it. But that's what I always think it is. I think it's a fake one. I actually have my transcript framed, which is kind of jokes. But yeah, I've always had that framed. Subtle reminders are key for me, so I have it. And it's funny, you see all my classes, it's just like 50s all across the board. So, and I'm not afraid to share that. It's kind of an interesting story. That's kind of my journey. And then the story I always like to tell is I remember I was in my young 20s. I lived at 844 Princess Street, and it was above an HIV clinic. And the apartment building was filled with drug addicts. And I remember going to bed some nights and like smelling like drug residue in my apartment, and I was super depressed. I was working at a Starbucks as a barista, making minimum wage. I think it was like $11 an hour. I couldn't afford my rent. Pretty much dead broke and depressed. And I think I spent majority of my nights crying myself to sleep than not. So I had a tough go, but a lot of it was my own choices and not taking care of myself. So I decided to make a couple of changes after an incident happened in my life, and I tried to become the best barista possible. It sounds kind of silly, but
That's
like I would
awesome.
crush it at Starbucks. I'd be like chatting with everyone, joking with everybody. Upper management, if you will, took notice, and I started getting promoted and moving up in that food chain. I became a store manager. I had a mentor, Derek Haru, if you ever hear this, I love him. Fantastic human that believed in me. And so I went from, and that's like one of the catalysts of my change was career growth and actually making some money and not living those same scenarios. And then also I found the gym in my young 20s. So that was game changing for me as well. When I decided to make changes in my life after that incident happened, I made the gym a regular routine, and that's kind of how my mental health advocacy, as of now, is so prominent around fitness. Is not only do I do this for a living, in terms of coaching people, but I've also have firsthand experience on the impact it's had on my life and taken me to where I am now. And I think that's like most of my story. I can talk more into how I met you guys if you want, but that's I think a good background of kind of the struggles that I kind of had to navigate through to get to where I am today.
Awesome. So what sort of training are you doing right now? Can you just give a little bit of a description what your day in life training is for our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. So right now it's pretty simple. I wake up and I run anywhere between 7 and 11 kilometers, and then at night, um, I go to the gym and I do between 100 and 250 pull-ups. And this time I'm doing things a bit different. So I do 100 reps of biceps, triceps, chest, about a half an hour, 15 minutes. I'm not gonna overshoot on some core work, and then about half an hour of stretching and mobility every day. But one thing I want to touch on real quick with that question is I look at training as the last 14 months when I committed to Umpi and Step Above Stigma to do the 24-hour pull-up record originally. So I don't ever look at things like my last 7 weeks or 8 weeks of training. I look at like all the stuff that I've done for this event. It gives you more confidence in my
Yep.
ability. But I think a couple of things that from talking to people that they're more interested in is the interesting sessions. So I call these sessions, I guess I call them like hell sessions. So my regular training is pretty, I don't want to sound like in a bragging way, but it's pretty comfortable. Like I've adapted to it. So it's like, I don't run super, it's an easy pace. The pull-ups are pretty easy, comfortable for me. Once a week, I go to the well. So like yesterday I did 500 pull-ups and a 30K run in 4 hours and 25 minutes.
That's insane.
Yeah, that was like one of my better ones. It's actually um, it was a grind. So I actually ran on Tyndall Field, the track. So
Yeah.
just a loop, and the wind actually got the best of me that yesterday. It wasn't the greatest performance, but I got the job done. But the I think there's a couple sessions I'd speak on real quick. I think there's a couple ones. And the one that I'm really known for that really kind of got me some notoriety was I did a world's first feat where I did 2,000 pull-ups and a half marathon. So 21-ish K in 9 hours. So I did 2,000
Wow.
pull-ups in 7, and then I did the half marathon right after in just under 2 hours. So that's like the one I'm kind of people know me for a bit, but um, I've done a couple other ones too. But I've done some pretty crazy hell sessions. But the one workout that really got me to build my mental toughness was I was actually coaching at a what is it, Western University? Western? I don't like
Yes.
I know it's Western, but like I don't really is it called
Yeah,
Western University?
Western University, yeah.
Yeah. I was coaching there all day, so I got like 5 hours of sleep, and then at the meets, I'm really busy, so I'm eating like my athletes like candy and donuts and things like that, and taking pre-workout and trying to like stay stimulated to focus all day. And then we drove back from London that night, and I had a half marathon on the docket, and I'm committed, right? So for me, it's like if something's on my sheet or I got to do something, I don't sleep until I get it done. So it was a temperature around like 1 or 2 degrees, and so like the the snow and the ice is kind of like warmed up a bit, and I ended up having to run. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I run up run up Brock and down Johnson, and there is not blocks, puddles of water, and I had no choice but to run on them, or else I'm going to hit by a car or the sidewalks are filled with Queen students partying. So I remember like 3 kilometers in, I'm running through these puddles, and my feet basically became ice blocks, and I ran really slow that night to get it done. But like that's kind of how I built this kind of. When people ask me, I want to touch on that mental toughness. I'm committed to that 21K. So I don't care if I have to walk it. I don't care if it's slow. I'm going to get it no matter how bad it hurts. I'm going to do it. And those kind of sessions really built up my mental toughness to be able to, I think, build my confidence to do these kind of world records. They don't really scare me as much as I think some of my peers ask me about, because I prepared myself, I think, to some pretty human extremes to get myself ready for this. Also, I want to throw in real quick a disclaimer, because I feel like that's very important to me. Is like, for people that are listening, or people that follow my Instagram, like, don't try this. Consult a physician. Like I don't want to say like I'm a professional, but like I feel like, when you see like David Blaine, or a magician, doing some crazy thing, or like, I'm a trained yada yada yada. Like, I'm trained for this. I've done this for a long time, so don't try that. But yeah, those are some really tough sessions. And then the last one I'll say is I worked a bar manager job at a restaurant, so I'd get off at 3 a.m. after like a 12-hour shift, super busy, and I committed to running a half marathon every Saturday night when I work. So the entire winter, it was like, whether it was -20 the one night, or a blizzard, doesn't really matter. I would run a half marathon around 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. Every Saturday. So that's kind of those are like the more important pieces of my training that I've done to get ready for this.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you quickly, you're saying like you kept telling yourself like, oh, I'm committed to this, so I just have to get it done. But like, what sort of things do you tell yourself like while you're running in like -20 weather with your feet that are pretty much ice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, there's a couple things, and the main thing that I run through my mind, even on this record, is I have a couple like key phrases that I use that mean a lot to me, and so one of the ones I tell myself, and I think self-talk is very important for athletes, and one of them is, I believe in you. And I lived a life where I'd say 99% of people didn't believe in me, and rightfully so, from what I was doing in my life. So for me, I just tell myself, like, I believe in you. You can do this today. And that's super helpful. And then I also think about how bad I want it. I really believe the difference between, like, I have no physical, like, I work with high level, like, world level athletes. Like, I know what talent is. I know what physical ability is. I'm surrounded by it. I've seen some freak athletes, and I'm not that guy. I'm a pretty normal, I don't have an athletic background. So for me, I realized that the only advantage that I have is the mental side of things. And I have to develop something different to get the job done. So I think self-talk is super important. And I think the only innate difference between me and most people that I notice is that, I know it's kind of like a cliche thing on Instagram, but when I say I want something bad, I really do. And I think I proved that with my actions. So for me, I just remind myself of how bad I want these things. And then the third thing is, it used to actually be like proving people wrong, but like I've kind of done that now. So for me, actually, for this prep too, is I've actually been thinking a lot about random people I don't know. So I've been thinking about this mental health awareness in people that are suffering, because I tell people all this all the time. Like, running a half marathon at 3 a.m. is really, really easy compared to someone living with severe or any kind of depression and anxiety. So if they can get through that every single day, then I can just suck it up and get through 2 hours of a little bit of pain. So
That's amazing that you like compare it to that when you're out there at 3 in the morning running. I never actually thought about it that way. So that's amazing. So obviously you've been telling me about how you've been training for the 14 months and doing an insane amount of pull-ups and an insane amount of running and an insane amount of reps. So I just want to ask you, why are you attempting to set this record? Like, what is motivating you?
yeah, that's a big question. I like it. So I think motivation is an interesting term. I think it's important. And for me, kind of like I touched on before, is a lot of my motivating factors in my life. And actually, first I'll say that I really don't like when people say any individual should be motivated by this or that, because we need to contextualize to the individual, because I know some athletes that are super motivated by external and some are internal. And if you try to flip it, their motivation, they actually perform worse. So it's
Yeah.
really an individual thing. So for me, again, it started with proving a lot of people wrong. I got a lot of joy out of that, and I lived a life, like I said before, is, you know, a lot of people laughed at me and told me I couldn't do anything in my life, and I'm not making that up. Like, this actually legitimately happened um, copious amounts of times. So that was huge for me. But then I think over the last like 2 years, I've had a little bit of a pendulum shift where what motivates me is there's two sides to it, right? There's the people forget that they're outside of the mental advocacy stuff. Like, I'm a fierce competitor, but also there's the other side of things as well. So the one side of things is, you know, when I talk to kids at second chance school programs, for an example, like one thing I like to do with them is, you know, is show them like, yo, like I was in these classes. So, and I've been able to be where I am today. And it's not in the sense of like bragging, but just to show people what's possible. And
Yeah.
then same with the depression and mental health stuff that people are going through it. And I get some people get good at way worse than me, some people not as bad as me. But you know, when this thing came out, what, 2 weeks ago, I have like no following on Instagram, but I had random people message me saying, "Hey, you don't know me, but seeing your story and what you've been able to do inspires me that I can, you know, work through my issues."
Amazing.
And I'm not an expert on mental health, by the way. I think that, like, I think I can speak on my story, but I'm not like a psychologist by any means or anything like that. But, you know, having these stories, that's kind of really motivated me as well. There's people that I guess they're messaging me, and, you know, I don't want to let them down. I really want to, that really motivates me on my hard days to get through it. And like one of the big ones I'll speak on is, I have to be kind of careful how I speak on it, but one of my good friends I grew up with passed away a few years ago suddenly. And a lot of that was him navigating through his own mental health issues, you know, and his mother messaged me recently and about it, and when I went public with this, and I committed to her to breaking this record. So those are definitely motivating for me. And then the other side of the competitor, I guess, is not so much legacy, but like, you know, I see what some of the other ultra guys are doing out there, and I don't believe that I can't hang with them.
Yeah.
I don't think so at all. I think that there's some amazing athletes out there that I respect to the highest levels and inspire me, but I think I can hang with them, and I want to prove to myself and some of my good friends that, you know, when you see these big names out there doing these crazy things, that, hey, like, you know, if we're competing against each other, they might beat me, I might beat them, but I can hang with the best of the best in the world. So that's kind of one of my things as well. But yeah, that's kind of my two motivating factors.
Those are awesome. No, I always find like for me, storytelling, like I'm not an expert in mental health either. Like I'm not a psychologist. Like I just have used my own experiences. And I think that storytelling is a catalyst for change. Like if you can tell your story, it's clear that like you will inspire others by just like opening a door. Like for me, like when I shared my story with mental health, I always found that people were like, oh, now I kind of feel more comfortable sharing mine. I feel more comfortable getting access to mental health services. It stimulates just a lot of change in our society. So I'm really grateful to you, Erin, for being able to open up on here today. So moving forward, I want to ask you, we've talked about mental health, but I want to ask you what physical health means to you.
Yeah, so physical health, good. I think there's a couple things. So one, I think we got to look at like general population and then like ultra world. So like for me, there's definitely some things about my body that I wouldn't consider healthy that I push myself to, but I think in terms of like general population, physical health is super important. So when you look at, I mean, Stu Phillips at McMaster has a lot of good literature on this, but people who resistance train and exercise, you know, they dramatically increase their quality of life into their later years. greater bone density and strength, even simple things, like using the washroom or getting up and down stairs. So I think you start those habits when you're young and more able to, and then kind of sustain that over time. So for me, big thing about physical health, aside from doing these feats and records, is when I'm 50 and I have kids, I want to be able to run with them and help them. But I think that's super important. I think the other side of things too is the discipline. So when people go to the gym regularly, and I'm not saying you have to be some crazy athlete, but you get stronger or fitter or whatever, like there's a lot of self-pride in that, and I think confidence builds confidence. So I think it's a great way to live your life. And the one thing I'll speak on real quick is, I look at things from like an evolutionary process, right? We're hunter gatherers, so we spend so much time outside and moving every single day, for thousands of years. And it's only been like really recently in a small part of our history where we're sedentary. We're waking up every day to a job we don't like, with a boss we don't like. We're sitting in an office or a library, and then after we're not feeling good, so we just go home, we sit on the couch. We're very sedentary when really, like, we're biologically wired to be moving all the time.
Yes.
So it is also, so people are interested, Dr. Rhonda Patrick has a lot of good stuff on this, but the literature is almost as concrete as gravity is real. So on this, that we moving is really, I guess, quote unquote, the best medicine for us, really. So we want to be moving, and our body rewards ourselves. I don't personally know too many people who are super active every day that are not, like, that don't have their mental health in a better place or in a good
Yeah.
place, or they're happy in life. Like, I just don't. Like, maybe there are people out there for sure, but all my peers and friends that are getting after it every day physically, whatever it is, are pretty happy, positive people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I remember, like, I've always been a very active person, but when obviously COVID hit, I always found it really, really hard to get back into a routine. And that took a significant toll on my mental health. And fortunately, the gym started opening up and I got back into it and I saw like how much it improved. So I just want to ask you, like, personally, how has physical activity benefited your mental health?
Yeah, I think to save my life, as seriously as I can say it. I always like to use this example, and I'm human, of course, so I obviously have days where I'm a bit stressed or angry at something or what have you. And there's times where I'm stressed or something's really bothering me or something arises in my life, and I'll just go hit like a 30-minute, 40-minute run, and then I think about that issue again, and I'm like, why was I so worked up about that? Like, I feel like, for me, the way I explain it is like, it just quiets things in my mind and quiets emotions and feelings. And I'm not saying you don't want to, like, you want to experience emotions and feelings, of course, and you want to be able to navigate through them and be with those things and process them. But it helps you, I think, honestly, it helps you deal with it better. So for me personally, I've I never really have a time when I'm not feeling good and then I go exercise and I don't feel amazing after, or in a better place. And I think
Totally.
everyone's pretty similar in that sense. And any kind of exercise is helpful, but the literature is really on aerobic training is like the sweet spot for humans in the brain, and like neurologically speaking, is super super beneficial. And it doesn't. And running's hard, by the way. Like, and it's painful and it takes a long time to build up. But like anything aerobic, like it can be an elliptical, it can be a treadmill, it can be a bike. It doesn't really matter. It really, really helps. But any kind of physical activity, of course, helps. But yeah, we see dramatic improvements in mood when humans are exercising and moving. So yeah, I recommend everyone commits to moving their bodies for sure.
Amazing. So the World Health Organization recommends that we get a minimum of 150 minutes of vigorous activity per week. Clearly, you surpass that like every single day, but I just want to
Mhm.
ask you, how can one implement exercise into their lifestyle? Like, do you have any tips, especially during COVID?
Yeah, for sure. One thing I'll say real quick about that, and I love the 150 minutes thing. The only thing I never, and this isn't you, you're just speaking to what they say. I
Yeah.
don't like the word vigorous in that sentence, because,
Yeah.
or their sentences, because, like, for me, it's very intimidating for, I think, someone who's just trying to get into it. Like, what does vigorous mean? Like, do I have to be training to I'm puking? Like, what's going on there?
Totally.
So I think, um, like, even for me, like once a week, my training's pretty vigorous for me personally, but the rest of it's pretty like normal pace and comfortable. But anyway, so I think that can kind of scare people. But I think that two things, and I I think for any individual, we need to reward the behavior we want to see continue. So the interesting thing, and actually, I keep shouting people out, but Dr. Andrew Huberman, he's a neuroscientist out of Stanford, who's obviously way more qualified than I'll ever be. But he has a really good thing on this, and I've learned is, and I had this experience with my father, and he's overweight and doesn't want to exercise. And I said, no matter what, just go to the gym, even if it's walking on a treadmill for 1 minute. Walk on the treadmill for 1 minute and go home. That's it. And he started doing that. And some days he would go to the gym and he'd walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes. And then the next day he would actually get a full workout in. And he actually started building those habits over time. And then it became like second nature. So I think for a lot of people who are trying to build these habits, even you could tie into COVID, is if you're struggling or to find the motivation or you're having a hard time getting it done, I am too. And obviously people now know the things I can do. I have those things too, and I experience the same feelings. So you're not alone. And but the one thing is that building that habit is way more important than anything. Because once it's a habit, it's like brushing your teeth. You're just going to do it, and it's much easier to do it. So for me, I always tell people start small. And this is the problem in January every single year. People that don't go to the gym at all go to the gym 5, 6 days a week. They're so sore and they can barely walk the next day after leg day, and their arms are sore and yada yada yada. It's like, well, how do you expect for people, if you're a fitness trainer or whatever out there, to sustain that? Like, I'm sore sometimes in my legs, and like I'm like I don't want to run, and I'm like an ultra athlete. So for the average person that's just getting into it, like that's not really the goal. I think starting small and manageable and building on that. So
Yeah.
if it's just like 3 times a week or twice a week, and then you go to 3 and then to 4, and you kind of build that. Because if you're beating your body to a pulp every single day, or if you're new to working out, it's going to be painful. Like you're going to be sore the next couple of days. It's like the last thing you want to do is make it worse by increasing that to an extreme. So I think starting small and manageable things. And the one thing I'll speak on real quick is it's like when people want to get better at running, it's like, well, I always tell people, well, you don't look at my Strava and see me run like a 10K at 3 in the morning or something and just go do that. Like I'm trained for this. I've spent a lot of my life doing this. Start by running. Literally, it sounds crazy, but run 1 loop around a track and then walk 3 loops. And the next day, run 2 loops, and
Yeah.
slowly build into it and build that confidence. But I think the one thing that I see with people is they start, they follow certain programs or fitness influencers on Instagram, for example, and they go way too hard and do way too much, and then they can't sustain that habit. It's like, for me, if I started writing more, I wouldn't write as much as you do. I would suffer. I couldn't keep up. I'd be like, screw this. But if I started writing like, half a page a day, it seems more manageable.
Yeah.
And with COVID, yeah. So a lot of my athletes with gyms shutting down didn't really have that option. So there's certain exercises and things you can do at home. But I think outdoors is important, because I know that I skip some workouts at home for sure. So it's hard to get up in your living room and do some body weight squats and things like that. But I think, like going to Lemoyne's Point or a trail. And another thing too is community. And I think it's super important to have, if you have any friends or family members as well, to kind of have that accountability piece. It's a lot easier to not skip out on a workout if your two friends are committing to doing it.
Yeah.
And it's also good just to spend time with people. And yeah, I think that's super important. I think a good support crew, working out with some friends, taking small steps and building into it, and committing to it and following through.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you on like starting small because I always found like I used to do the exact same thing, whether it be like the school year or summer body or whatever BS kind of workouts. Like I always thought that I'd have to like start at the elite level. And what would happen to me is I get super, super discouraged, which would ultimately decrease my confidence, which would lead to me not actually exercising. So it's kind of like this vicious cycle. But if like you celebrate the small wins by just doing it incrementally, I think that, yeah, obviously you will build up a habit of doing it and you'll actually reap more benefits. And also for me too, I was also doing workouts that I didn't enjoy. And I think I think it's important to do physical activity, like exercises and stuff that you actually enjoy, because that will kind of give that positive reinforcement rather than, say if you don't like lifting weights, like don't lift weights if you don't like it. But if you like running, then go running, like
Yeah, and real quick, I'll touch on that, and you absolutely nailed that. And so one thing that you spoke about, but enjoying is, yeah, when you see people that are doing things that they enjoy, they're going to do it more. Obviously, I really, really love watching football every Sunday, so I watch football every Sunday because I enjoy it. I don't enjoy watching, you know, you know, what is Desperate Housewives or something like that. So I don't do it. So, but one thing is that you need to build that base first, and that's super important. Like, don't get me wrong, there's certain training that I do that I don't enjoy, but I got to where I am today by doing stuff that I did enjoy. And it's funny because like I'm a bro, right? So like I'll go to the gym and do like an arm workout. I saw my arms getting a little bit big. I'd be like, Mom, look at my muscles or whatever. I enjoyed that process. And then once I enjoyed that process, I could build on from there. And the other thing too, I always recommend for people is like, nowadays, like I can go on Strava and I can see like an elite marathon runner, which I'll never be, running like crazy high mileage at crazy paces. And for me to go and try to emulate that is going to leave me with like a broken ankle. So I think it's important to like, if you're using that for inspiration, that's great, but also like understand your own like limitations. And as someone who explores human limitation, I do still listen to my body, and I thought like that's super important as well. Because it's really, really hard to want to train when you're in pain all the time. It's just not really feasible for the long-term success.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you one final question. Why do you think it's important to invest in audacious pursuits?
Hmm. This is maybe my favorite question of the day. I think life without purpose is a life of misery, and without purpose, it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning and do things. You're kind of living mundane through society until you die. So I think it's very important to, I always say like when any of my athletes finish a powerlifting meet and just say they crush it, they do really well. When we go back in a training camp, the first question you could ask any of them that I ask them is, what are your goals for the next training cycle or the next competition? For each, like what numbers do you want to hit for each
Yeah.
lift? And they give them to me. And the reason is that I try to like really get people to write these things down or think of them to have a target to aim for. Like you need to have a target to aim for, whether it's a GPA or whatever it is. Without that, you're just aimlessly moving around in the world with no identity to what you're in fact doing every single day. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Like, are you doing it for anything? Are you just like trying to just like navigate through life on the whim of your pants? So
Yeah.
the good thing about goals and purpose is, well, good thing about goals is you get that purpose, so you have more fire and drive and commitment to doing the things. But there's nothing sweeter than accomplishing these things. I'm sure when you finished that book, you were pretty freaking fired up, right? Like when I
Yeah,
finished the marathon, I'm like, there's no greater feeling than that, really.
totally.
So I think that's super important. But the one thing I want to talk about goal setting real quick is, it's funny. I love the word realistic. And I know like this whole friggin' wave on Instagram is like, don't be realistic with your goals, blah, 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 blah. Like, dude, like I am a human, I guess, extremist in what I do. And I always have realistic goals. I think it's good to have like maybe long-term, like crazy goals for sure. But you need to have small realistic goals to stay on the course and stay on the path. And like you said, it's like little small wins that build. I always say confidence builds confidence, and the long-term goals don't matter if the day goals don't happen. So for me, I'll talk like the last 14 months, it's like, okay, I got to run 3,000 kilometers and do 81,000 pull-ups. That's a pretty crazy, borderline unrealistic, insane goal. But if you break that down to today, I just got to run 10 kilometers and do 100 pull-ups. It's much more manageable. So, right? So for me, it's like all I have to do today for training purposes is I just have to nail these two things. And I know if I do that every single day, the 81,000 or 3,000 and being able to do these world records, et cetera, will be there. But I think a lot of people see the entire holistic goal and it freaks them out. And I think that winning the day is more important. So yeah, goals are if you don't have goals, I don't know. It's going to be a really, really tough go for you as a person. And I think last thing I'll speak on more specific around goals is I think long-term goals are super important. Like I said, I think the day-to-day goals are the most important, but you got to have a variety of different timeline goals and also understand why you want to achieve them.
Yeah.
Like a goal without a why is not really a goal at all. So it's important, like, why do you want to write a book, for an example, you know? And I'm sure, I don't want to speak for you, of course, but I'm sure one of it is your impact on people, like you've had on me, so, and inspiring me. So I think that keeps people on task as well. But yeah, have goals, write them down, right? Like a 5-year, 3-year, 1 year, and then the day-to-day of how you're going to get there.
Amazing. Well, that was some great insights. And yeah, how 81,000 pull-ups just sounds, or 81,000, however many things you were doing, sounds so unrealistic, but by breaking it down, it can actually be a lot more feasible. And then at the end of the day, each day you can celebrate that you accomplished those 100 pull-ups, 10-kilometer run, but then it builds up over time. And when you do reach that goal, it's literally like, I remember when I published my book and actually held my book in my hands for the first time, it was the most rewarding experience. And there were days throughout that writing was harder, but each day it was kind of like, oh, maybe I'll write 1,000 words today, 500 words today, and it all builds up and accumulates over time. But yeah, so today we have talked about physical health. It's so important to get your body moving, especially during COVID, and Aaron has provided amazing tips. But before we come to a close, I just want to ask you, Aaron, where can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, so one thing real quick, I want to do one quick shout out thing.
Yep.
That's okay?
Yes.
I want to give shout outs to my mom, my father, Jordan, Braden, and then Umpai.
Yes.
I hope she's going to listen to this.
She will.
She must think I'm crazy because every time I see her, I'm like, you're the greatest human being I've ever known. And I was like, what? Like, but no, she believed me from the start. And I got so much friendly love for that individual. I think she's like one of the greatest humans to ever be in my life anyways. So I want to give her that shout out. But yeah, so I post all my training on Strava. People are interested in that. So just my name, Aaron Edgley, Edgley. I'm sure you'll post in the links.
Yep.
One thing that I pride myself in is I don't hide my training. So I know that some like other, world class at whatever the craft they're doing, or elite athletes will hide their training. I don't hide my heart rate, my kilometers, my pull-ups. Everything is totally for the public to look at. And then Instagram is where I post a lot of my coaching business stuff and my own journey. And that's just my first name _ my last name. I'm sure you'll tag that and post that as well. But that's kind of where my journey is on a lot of it. So if people are interested in my like day-to-day training, that's on Strava. And then anyone who's interested in kind of my journey, it's on Instagram.
Amazing. And also in the podcast episode description, I will be putting the GoFundMe link if you're interested in donating to this amazing record. Yeah, any donation counts. I'm really grateful to you, Aaron, in this amazing discussion. So that is the conclusion of our episode. I will see you next time.